As the decade of the 50s began, life in the UK was returning to some sort of normality. At Prince Rupert's School, Mr. Smitherman, the first headmaster, had left in the summer of 1951, and Mr. Slimming was acting head for one term. In January 1952, Mr. Pacey became the next headmaster, and after his first assembly wrote, "I made a snap judgment that I'd come to a good school." Later he wrote, "My early impression was confirmed and much of this quality was inherited as a result of Mr. Smitherman's powers of leadership and the loyal teaching staff." By January 1953, with a school roll of 620, an increase in staffing, plus the fact that Mr. Pacey did not think it appropriate for boys and girls to live in shared boarding houses, it was time to make some changes. On the main site, Howe, Drake and Rodney became girls-only houses. Matthews ceased to exist, and Collingwood girls moved into this building from what was then to become Hood Junior Girls. Collingwood and Drake boys took over Raleigh and Grenville buildings on the Fleegerdyke, and these houses ceased to exist. Frobisher Junior Girls also opened on the Fleegerdyke. Rodney and Howe boys moved to the Bonterheim. The new teaching block took the name of Raleigh, and the new building by the guardhouse was named Grenville, where there were offices, classrooms and a cinema seating 80. A new staff mess was installed above the dining rooms in Nelson. The link buildings, Beatty, Keyes, Sturdy and Jellicoe, were extensively remodelled and became classrooms for domestic science, history and geography, metalwork, engineering and woodwork. The former Bond block next to Collingwood was built up to the first floor and became Fisher, and housed rooms for needlework and light crafts. Planning permission was approved for the building of a new gym, and despite the need for considerable drilling and piling, this building was completed in 1952. In addition, modifications were made to the large hall adjoining the boiler house to produce further gymnasium facilities.
I was Madeline Howlett, now Madeline Thomas, and I went to Prince Rupert's School. I arrived there in January 1953 and stayed there till July 1957, so I completed my schooling. I came by school train, and prior to that I'd come from Berlin to Hanover, and the school train to Wilhelmshaven, so it was quite a long journey.
Right.
And very cold when we got there.
Yes, and your first memories of actually arriving at the school?
My first memories were a sense of the vastness of it. It was dark when we got there, and everybody was scurrying around, and I didn't know where I was going, and I was totally confused, and I thought it was just a bit confusing, and it was nothing like my previous boarding school in Austria, which had been very cosy and friendly.
You were Drake
girls.
Drake girls, so
Yes.
you went straight to your senior house?
Yes.
Because you were a little bit older
I
than...
was 13.
Right.
Just the end of 13.
Okay. And presumably in January it would have been fairly cold?
It was cold, yeah. The rooms were warm.
Yes,
Indoors,
yes.
It was really cosy indoors. So.
Yes, this is what everyone says about the school. It was really cold outside,
Yes.
but because of double glazing,
Yes.
which everyone
It was
remembers,
lovely.
probably seen for the first time in that particular
Yes.
school.
Yes.
What memories have you got of the daily routine or the weekly routine?
My memories of PRS, actually I didn't think I'd gone there to work. I thought I'd gone there to enjoy the sport, actually.
Right, so
The
sport was
climate at the
important.
time was that you didn't bother to educate girls, where I came from. You just got rid of them until they were 18, and then you married them off. So the sport was the important bit, to enjoy that. The cinema, it was a treat when you could go. You couldn't go every week, and it was the first thing people took away from you if they were gating you or putting you in detention. It was
So you
always
had
going
to behave.
Yeah, it was always going to be the cinema, especially if there was a good film. And if you had a boyfriend, you could sit in the back 2 rows, and staff sat behind you.
The
was a
cinema
treat.
you're talking about was quite small.
It was
Is
very
that-
big, yeah.
Yes,
very big.
because I can remember a little bit later on,
Yes,
we used to go to that cinema
Yes.
for educational films.
right, yes.
And I can remember the sort of winding noise of the
Right.
film. I
Projectionist,
don't, yes,
Yes, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I can't remember that.
No.
But because we went to Churchill in the end, didn't
That's
we?
right.
And my major memory is everything was dominated by the bell. The
Right.
bell rang, and
Mhm.
you seemed to wake up when the bell rang, and you went downstairs to go over to meals when the bell rang, and there were sort of 5-minute pauses before you then went into the dining room, and then the bells went again, and it was very, very regimented.
Yes, quite a strict routine.
A very strict
A
routine.
little bit
yes.
maybe of a military
It was
nature.
very, yes,
Mm.
and that was new to me.
Yes.
I'd always been in much more laissez-faire atmospheres
Yes.
than that, where it didn't matter if you were a bit late and it didn't matter if you got to the right place.
Mm.
And that was a shock.
We grew up, me and my sisters grew up with the occupation from my father. He was on duty daily, and often at the weekend, when he had to look after the school boys and girls.
Yes.
Yeah. So we spent it also. We girls spent also many time on weekends on the sport places.
Did you?
But yeah,
Yes.
but we liked it.
Your whole
yes.
family went to the sports
Yes,
club.
yes,
That's
yes.
good. And you used to travel to other places with the school for the sports events?
Oh yes, unforgettable for me, all the sports events, boxing, swimming, boxing boxing fights in the house called Schützenhof, Nordseestation, and swimming events in the Marinebad.
Yes.
Marinebad.
Is the Marinebad the Sportsplatz? Is that the Sportsplatz? Or
Yeah. Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
yes.
Great.
The
Yeah.
boxing, was that inter-school boxing? You know, did they box children from other schools?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Contests with other schools from Wilhelmshaven
Yes.
and other associations like TSR, Tura, and yeah, the Boxring,
Right.
all other associations. Yes.
Were you connected with boxing in some way at school?
Yes, I was the school boxing captain. I boxed at school and I was the school boxing captain, and it's one of those things I felt I ought to do because it was a manly thing, you know, and I was quite good at it. I wasn't brilliant.
Did you go on any inter-school boxing matches?
Yes, I boxed against the Germans.
Oh, in the town?
No, I don't think they were in the town. I think they were a bit further off. I can't remember which town they were now. That was, and then they came and boxed us.
Yes.
And also I went to Plön, boxed against Plön.
Yes.
And Plön came and boxed against us.
In 52, a new chapel called St Willibrord was consecrated at the top of Nelson. Holy Communion services were held here regularly, with larger services held in Churchill House. The parish was known as St Nicholas and St Willibrord. The proposed new church building plans were approved, and by the following Easter, the foundations had been laid to a depth of 23 metres, and then the upward growth of the chapel commenced with the foundation stone unveiled by the Bishop of Stepney in July 55.
Around about the time you were at the school, the new church was built. Do you remember that being built, or was
Yes,
that?
I can particularly remember the ceremony because the bishop came with his crook and banged on the door. It's apparently it's something to do. It's like black rod in a way.
Yes.
And he actually damaged the door apparently. So.
The official dedication of the chapel took place on the 6th of May 1956, when the Bishop of Fulham performed this ceremony. 600 members of the school and 100 visitors and parents were present.
Now you've mentioned the church. Now you actually saw the new church being built.
Yes.
So have you got very many memories of that?
Well, I do remember it was a big occasion when it was consecrated. The Bishop of Fulham or somewhere, it was always the Bishop of Fulham for confirmations, came. But I can't remember much more about it. All I remember was the Catholics always having to shuffle out in assembly.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, what do the Catholics do about a church? So now we've all got this proper church.
Yes.
Because it didn't seem bad shoving them out of Churchill, but and I never did find out actually.
I think the Catholics, when I was there in 57, did have their own little chapel in one of the small buildings towards the end of main site. And yes, and I think also at one time Miss Tebbs would have been the person to talk to, because she was Roman Catholic and she had the history of that. But I think there was something in Nelson. Now, while you were at the school, you actually met your future wife. Would you like to have a little?
Yes, I think I wasn't really conscious of Madeleine for about 6 months or so. And then she asked me for my autograph after a boxing match or something. And I thought, well, that's strange, because I was very slow in the uptake, you know. But eventually we started going out with each other after about a year, I think. And that was my best memories of the school, in fact, the fact that we went out with each other.
I think he didn't notice me till he saw me swimming, and I think he liked me swimming and diving. That's when he started to notice me, but I could be quite wrong.
Right. So your relationship continued at the school.
Yes.
And then I understand 2 or 3 years later you were married, is that right?
Yes. Well, what happened was, when we got to the 6th form, towards the end of the 6th form, we'd been going out with each other a couple of years by then, and my house mistress said to me, people didn't approve of the friendship, it was time to cool it, and I ought to think of my future and stop going out with him.
Really?
Yeah, she told me that, and she said you could be head of the house next term but you'll have to stop seeing Peter Thomas because it's getting too friendly. Because I suppose we were 17 and Pete was 18 by then, and I ignored it. I wasn't really told what to do. Anyhow, the sad outcome was that the cop then, Mr. Pacey, called Peter in towards the end of that term and said, because he'd missed the schooling, he was quite old, he was 18, pushing 19, and he had another year in the 6th form, and said, I think you're too old for this school now, Peter, sort of thing, Thomas. And so Pete said, oh, okay, right, I won't come back. He didn't seem to mind. So he went off, he didn't come back, he went back to England and was immediately conscripted into his national service.
In December 1952, the Sea Cadet Corps mustered for the last time, and in January 1953, the combined cadet force was created at the school, with the Sea Cadet tradition kept alive by the naval section of the new CCF. Guides, Scouts, Rangers and the Red Cross also became an important part of out-of-school voluntary activities, and groups met weekly and appeared at school parades.
Memories, so getting some shags on and bockwurst were a big delight for some reason.
Special treats, weren't
Yeah,
they?
you know.
Yes.
Going out to Karstadt and getting the bockwurst and watching all the other junior children rushing up and down the escalator until the store complained to the headmaster about it. I had this policy of being when I was head of the table, of being hard and cruel, I was what we called it. And if some junior had done something to annoy us, we cut down on his rations, which is pretty awful. On his puddings only, he always had his main one. And I had some chap who was really greedy, and he'd sit next to me and he'd say, Payne, come on Payne, let's be hard and cruel, let's be hard and cruel.
Yeah.
But you always regret something, and that's one of the things I regret.
PRS was something else with proper coaches and bags and monitors and prefects.
The traditional
and
girls'
that.
own.
But yeah, the traditional
Yes.
public school
Yes.
stuff was a total shock to me, and I thought it was awful. I only hated it for the first term.
Were you homesick?
I was, and I hadn't been homesick at my former boarding school, but I
That's
was
interesting.
homesick because people got you to be their fag. You had to run around after them. You were put in detention for what one particular person called dumb insolence, by the way you looked when you were told off. And I just found it appalling.
That sounds quite strict. Was that from the house or
That was-
from the
that
actual
was-
sort of lesson?
That was the monitors in
the
the
monitors,
house. The
gosh.
lessons were no trouble,
Yes.
but the discipline in the house I thought was appalling.
Because that will probably have varied as the
From house to house.
yes, and also from
yes.
one year to the next when you had a
Yes,
different
yes,
group
Yeah,
of monitors.
Yes, I think I arrived there in early '53 when it was still very Tom Brown school days-ish somehow, and by the end of '53 into '54 it was already much better, much nicer.
Do you think the headmaster at the time, Mr. Pacey, had any direct influence on
I
that?
I
at all?
think Mr. Pacey probably hadn't been there long when I got there, and I think he liberalised the place actually.
Right.
I think he was probably quite an influence on making it more liberal and more democratic. I mean, I might be quite wrong, it might have been
Well,
somebody else. Mr. Boyer would have had that influence.
Yes, but
Yeah.
certainly the previous headmaster, Mr. Smithman,
Yes.
had been a military man.
Yes.
And in setting up the school, there was,
Mm,
this sort of,
yes,
as you said, this
yes,
sort of discipline which
yes,
was
yes,
there,
yes.
and by the sort of mid-50s, that was generally,
yes.
sort of being a little bit out of date
Yes,
and
eroding.
becoming
Yes.
more informal.
Yes,
Any memories of any of the staff, any particular staff?
Yes, I loved Mr. Boyer. I thought he was really amusing, Jenny Boyer's father.
Yes,
He became senior master, I think.
yes. Was he a teacher?
He was a teacher.
He taught you?
He taught English, and I don't think I had him for very long, but I remember him reading us, I think it was Christopher Isherwood's Come Back to Berlin or something like that, and he just enlivened it all.
Yes.
And the Kopf, we had him for the occasional lesson fill-in, and he was a really good teacher.
Was he?
We had him for
Yes.
a geography lesson once, and it was just riveting.
Despite most pupils attending at least 6 schools before coming to Prince Rupert School, others a lot more, there's evidence to show that when attending the school during their public examination years of 15 to 18, many pupils gained A and O-level GCEs, RSA Commercial Studies and school certificate examination passes. Several boys went on as Army, RAF and Royal Navy apprentices and to Sandhurst, Cranwell, Welbeck and the universities. Described by a civil service report of 1950, as a mixed secondary multilateral boarding school, the staff and pupils of Prince Rupert's School can be rightly proud of these good results. Pupils think that the staff are there to teach them, support and care for them. They are not always aware that staff have a life as well. They may be married and have families. They may be single and even find their partners at the school. 12 staff marriages took place during the time of the school. The social life of the school brought some sort of normality to the lives of adults working in a foreign country, and friendships have endured long since the closing of the school.
I understand in those early days of the school there were animals.
Yes.
On the main site.
Yes.
You can recall these?
I can remember them because they were in the school farm, which was up, you know where the playing field is with the bunker? Well, it was to the side of that, up near where the cinema was.
Yes.
Which I think is Grenville. It was admin
Yes.
and things and secretarial.
Yes.
And they had pigsties with pigs, and I think they had various other animals, but there was the pigs that I particularly remembered because you walked straight past them. And they would come grunting out and look to you and, you know, want you to lean over and see them and things. And I think we had chickens and that sort of thing as well. And it always smelt a bit when you got up there.
A bit farmy.
Yeah, and I liked it. I liked it. And I found it really bizarre because I'd never heard of a school that had a farm in it.
Yes. Well, I suppose it's probably something to do with the lack of food generally at that time from the war years, because a lot of the Germans were still quite hungry, weren't they?
Yes. Yes, that probably. I mean, I thought it was to teach some of the other students agricultural stuff, how to look after the pigs and the animals, and you know what you did. That was that. Nobody told me. I just thought that's what this must be for. I never even thought of feeding everyone.
Now, social-wise, as well as the cinema, I understand you were quite interested in riding and dancing and things like that.
I loved all that.
Yes. Dances, where were they held?
Well, dances were, first of all, when I first got there, we seemed to have house dances for the intermediates, which was, you know, third form, or juniors and intermediates. And then next term, when I moved up to fourth form, we had senior dances, which were much more exciting. I particularly remember when I got there being desperate to get a taffeta dress with a huge skirt and a waspy elastic belt, or petticoats, and you loaned and borrowed from everyone. And it was a real, you know, it was a real free-for-all to go to these dances looking absolutely wonderful in somebody else's clothes.
Yes.
You hoped.
Yeah. These were the senior.
This was the senior ones, but the junior ones were not quite so competitive. When I was in the juniors and intermediates, we didn't care so much what we wore. We just wear our cardi and an ordinary dress.
Not so aware of the fashions, presumably. Can you sum the school up in any way?
I think it was. It was like a home if you'd been to lots and lots of other schools, and you had friends for 2 or even 3 years, which was so much better than just 6 months or a year and all the chopping and changing. I think it was the other people there that made it really rich, and also the diversity of people there. I met such different sort of people, you know, really across the range, accents, backgrounds, interests. You know, it was really a broadening experience.
Yes, and I think the class system was, it didn't exist.
It didn't exist. You weren't aware and you didn't want to know. And I think that helped me in my later career enormously, actually. It really gave me a much broader perspective. I got the cultural one from going to the German schools. I knew how different people were in different cultures, but I hadn't realised how different they were within the same culture. And I think it was that, and I think it was the spirit of the pupils too. I think what they call the hidden curriculum, you know, there's the school's curriculum, and then there are the hidden curriculum, and I learned all about that at PRS, and it stood me in real good stead later.
You were a little girl when your father first started working at Prince Rupert's School. What memories have you got from your childhood?
When I was a little girl.
Well, yes.
Yes. Oh, I loved the Christmas parties.
Yes.
for us children
Mm-hmm.
when we became little presents.
Yes.
And unforgettable for me since today was the English plum pudding.
Did you have contacts in the town with the
Yes,
English people?
from time to time we were
Yes.
guests in
Yes.
some teacher families.
Yes.
They lived most in Wilhelmshaven in the Mozartstraße, Hegelstraße,
Yes.
Schulstraße,
Right.
and they were guests in our house too.
From the early days of the school until 1960, at least 45 drama and musical productions were put on at the school. Some of the productions were very ambitious, others serious or more light-hearted. The dedication, time and effort spent by the staff and performers for all these productions is a reflection and an important element of the rich and memorable life of Prince Rupert School. Mr. Pacey left in the summer of 1957, and Mr. Wallace Hoskin from King Alfred School, Plern, filled the post for one term. Mr. Munger was acting head for the spring term of 1958, and Mr. Sharp took up position as headmaster at the beginning of the summer term.
And then we used to have this lino on this corridor, and every day we used to, the rooms took it in turns to be on bumper duty. Have you ever seen those bumper things? And we used to swing these things up and get them really shiny. I think I was in this room once for a little while, 120. We used to have, they look quite small actually, but there used to be four or even 5 in some of them. And this was the, this one here was where we used to keep our shoes. This used to be all lockers for shoes. And we used to come in here and clean our shoes. Amazing, isn't it? And this was the washroom, but the washroom wasn't like this. There used to be a sink, double-backed sinks in the middle. And there used to be a door over there, which you went through to a bathroom.
That's the door with the...
It's a mark, yeah. I didn't like getting washed in public. And we used to have our towels hanging on hooks. In fact, it looks as though that might be hooks there. My very last term, this is going to be a slightly bigger room, isn't it? There were 3 of us in this room, and that was the very last room that I was in before I left. There used to be a prefect's bathroom and toilet and shower room was there, so we never actually used that. But over here was our loos, but we didn't have urinals. But we did. It's very similar, you know. There used to be a separate loo here, and all of these others here. I used to hate it in here. Lieselotte Bischoff, your Drake boys would have known you as matron, and in fact you were Fräulein Schulze back in 1955. How long did you work at Prince Rupert School?
Well, I started in September 55 as assistant matron in Drake Boys. And before that, I'd been 6 years in England. So to become a matron, you had to be able to speak English very well, and you have to be a liking to children, to look after them. And for me this was about perfect when I got this job. I wanted to use my knowledge of English and I wanted to look after children.
Well, actually, I came quite soon after you
Yes,
started.
I think the same year.
Well, no, I came in 56.
Oh, yes.
So it would have been about a year
Yes.
after you'd started. And I left at the very end of 1957. One of the first of your thousands, maybe.
Yes, you can say thousands.
Yes, yes.
Because there were about 100 boys at the school, at the house, and there was continuous change when the fathers were sent to other places in the world. And I think the average stay at school was about a year and a half.
David, when you arrived here as a 14-year-old boy, what were your first impressions when you walked into this building where we're sitting now? And perhaps you'd like to just describe where we are sitting.
Well, we're sitting, actually this is just off the old homework room,
Yes.
preparation room. So this was one of the first, there were sitting rooms and games rooms.
Yes, and this was the largest sitting room.
I arrived just after term started, so we'd come to Germany, to Krefeld, and within 2 or 3 days of arriving in Germany, I was put on the train
To PRS.
all on my own. And I also remember being met at Wilhelmshaven Bahnhof at the
Yes.
station, because I wasn't coming on the school train. And there was Dalton and Haley.
Oh, David Dalton. Yes, he was a boy.
Yes, and Geordie Binns.
Yes.
They met me at the station and then brought me to the house.
Yes. I remember them quite vividly. David Dalton, he was a marvelous boy.
Yes.
And John Binns,
Yes.
he was, he played in the skiffle
That's
band.
right. Yes.
And I took a photo, that's in the memorabilia.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yes, it
yes,
is.
yes.
I
Yes,
think
it's-
Great Boys is known for its skiffle group. We've got
Yes.
1 or 2 pictures of the skiffle
Yeah.
group.
There
Yeah.
was Rod, David Rod,
Yeah, Turley
Turley and Binns in the
Yes.
skiffle
and
group.
Oswald, Oswald Binns, Turley. And that photo was taken by me.
Yes.
And it was funny, because in the evening I had to go around to close all the windows, 10 o'clock. And these boys were still playing at 10 o'clock. They should have been showered and in bed. So our boys, time to get to bed, and they'd got a recorder on. And then they let it go, and I heard my voice, and I didn't recognize her.
We had the hot water pipe central heating
Yes.
in the old big cast radiators. And in those days, that's virtually unknown in Britain. And that always sticks in my mind, these lovely hot radiators.
Yes.
And the other thing which was memorable was, in fact, the double windows, the two sets of windows. Each one not double glazed because it was single panes,
Yeah.
but two windows, 2 sets of windows, and that also sticks in my mind. The
Yes.
combination of those 2 things.
Are there any particular incidents that perhaps you both remember?
Oh, one outstanding thing, the Asian flu. But were you still here?
Yes.
That was,
Yes.
I think it was 59, I'm not quite sure.
I think
57.
57.
57, wasn't it?
There was in fact a series of flu epidemics
But the
in the
big
50s.
one was-
The big one was 57. Yes. 1957.
Many memories of that?
Barbara, you can't believe how tired a person can get. Sick bay was very quickly at the end of their capacity, and then my little boys had to dismantle their beds, carry it upstairs in the bedroom, and at one time we had 40 bedridden boys in the prep room.
I do have one particular memory of walking up through the old docks. This was on my own, probably breaking the rules. Walking through the old blitzed dock areas,
Yes.
when bunkers were collapsed and so on and so forth. Seemingly miles from anywhere, and suddenly I was wearing uniform because we had to, and the cap, and suddenly this bird landed on my head, this raven, and I was scared out of my wits. And
You ran.
beat it off with my hat and ran back to town. But I'm looking back on it, I find it strange that I should be in that area on my own.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Lieselotte, what sort of memories have you got going back of the town and the weather and those sorts of things?
When I returned from my stay in England in '55, I was surprised to still find a town with debris from the war, actually, and houses that hadn't been rebuilt. Wilhelmshaven was one of the towns that it took longest to build up again. I think it was really more or less complete at the beginning of the 60s.
Yes.
But it has been put on because we were here relying on the Navy.
Yeah.
It is a Navy town.
Yeah.
And of course, in those days there was no Navy. When they restarted when I came here. I remember the little rowing boats and the new mariners, the new Navy men, getting the commands what to do, and the first ships that Germany was allowed to have, real naval ships, they came here.
Yes.
I could look out of my room and I could watch that. And then gradually, Wilhelmshaven didn't become richer, but the economics were getting better.
Now we're sitting on the Fliegerdyke now. It's an absolutely beautiful day. There are cyclists going along the cycle path, as there always have been, but there seem to be more than ever these days. You didn't actually have your classes over here, did you? You had to go over to the main site for classes. Now, how did you get there? It's not a long walk, but did you have transport?
They didn't have to walk, they got buses.
They have the buses.
That's right.
You were allowed to walk, but the buses were.
Yes.
Yes.
German Ford buses in khaki colour, and they used to take us because, of course, the actual road between here and the main site, the teaching site, in those days was just cinder track, and it used potholes and so on.
And presumably these were German staff from the town doing this.
This is one very important item. Prince Rupert School was, after the war, the first employer for quite a number of German people. I think there were about 200.
homesick. I was particularly at first, I remember being very homesick. The importance, matron,
Yes.
was that she was a surrogate mother
Yes.
and did an awful lot to cure that homesickness.
Yes.
And you were very important in our
Yes,
lives
yes.
from that point of view.
It was always in the evenings. Oh, the kid, I've got a stomach ache. Oh, my head is aching. Come, Babu. Just tell me all about it. It was just the task for me. All the Germans that worked here, from the cleaner to the kitchen maids and cooks and matrons, they all just gave that tick more than wasn't expected of them, because they liked it, they loved it.
And it was greatly appreciated.
Yes. Here at Prince Rupert School, you could, you weren't ordered around. It was left to you how you filled in the task you were doing. And that was, of course, very different from the German way of working. In Germany, you get taught to do this and that and that. Oh, matron, you do as you like, you'll do it, and it'll be all right. Whatever job I went later, I went to the medical center after I got married. Of course, I couldn't stay, when I was matron, I had to stay day and night here.
Yeah.
And then I went to the medical center to do the clerical work. Then later in the admin, I'd never been doing any admin work, but the bursar said, oh, Frau Bischof, you just try, we'll see in 2 months if you're able to, but you do it. It was just expected. We were given the opportunity, and
you used your initiative to do what you thought was the right thing for your boys.
And we had the opportunity was given to us to bring out the best that was in you.
Yes. And now it's been a long time since the school closed, and you've still got a great interest in everything connected with the school and the pupils, the staff, and also people working and living in the town. Right, thank you.
Well, I look back with fond memories. I suspect at the time, as I say, I was homesick. I'd settled down. I did enjoy it, at least some of the time.
David used to bring the newspapers and lay them out in one of the common rooms.
I had very important. I was the paper monitor and collected the English newspapers and brought them up to the common room. As you say, laid them out. And in those days we had titles like the Herald and News Chronicle, which have all now disappeared. Yes, they've gone. And I also remember, because that was a time, I remember the newspapers being filled with reports of the first Sputnik.
Oh, yes,
the Soviet Sputnik.
Course, yes.
It was also the time of the Suez War. And I do have this memory of Mr. Doherty, I think.
Mr. Doherty, yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
He had lights out coming round to the room to check, lights off now. And I always remember him opening the door and saying, well, boys, we're now at war, because we were at war with Egypt and the Suez Crisis. So much of this place now being new, refurbished. Here is one of the original doors. It's got new handles and new lock, but it's the original panel. Yes.
Some of these doors were locked.
Yes.
There were benches in where you could do woodwork, but we didn't use it.
No.
And this side was
Yes.
used for...
No, I must admit I don't remember going to rooms on that side, but on this side, and the common room at the end.
This was
Yes.
2 toilets and 2 bathrooms were here.
This is the second floor of what used to be Drake Boys. Absolutely beautiful stairwell here.
Yes.
I'm not sure if any of the little boys slid down the banister rails, but they didn't.
No. They were, well, Mr. Cullen taught them.
Yes, well, that could present quite a health and a safety issue,
Yes.
couldn't it?
The stairwell is the original. It's the original stairs, the original banister. And also I seem to remember that iron work. Isn't that original? Is that original?
What, the wrought iron?
This wrought iron here. I remember there was wrought
It
iron.
was, but it was.
Perhaps not
Yes,
that,
but-
but certainly there was wrought iron.
Yes.
We're walking down the junior boys corridor with Elise Lutter just taking us to her
This
room.
was my
Okay, is it open?
on duty and off duty,
Yes.
and now it is a big office. They removed
Ah.
one wall.
Mm.
And
Original.
shall I open?
No, don't worry. David, can you just say what the significance of this is, please?
This is my last day at the school, 13th of December 1957, and at the end of each term, here in this very location were these train plans for the school trains, taking the children to the various garrison towns across Germany. And because I was always the last out of this building, whether it was going to the main site or catching the school train, I was the last out, so I took this as a souvenir with me. And it shows the layout of the two trains, train A going to Mönchengladbach, and train B going towards the East German border. It's interesting how long the journey took. For example, from Wilhelmshaven to Mönchengladbach was nearly 9.5 hours. And then from Dusseldorf, there were other children that went on to another train in which there were reserved compartments. They got to Cologne eventually at 2000 hours. So that was 10 hours. So here we have 38 children going through to Berlin, detraining at Hanover for a connection in Hanover. Of course, during the Berlin airlift, of the children having to do the last bit by aircraft, sitting on sacks of coal and potatoes in old Dakotas and aircraft being used for the Berlin airlift. And I think there was one story about those aircraft being buzzed by the Soviet MiG fighters, with the Prince Rupert School children waving out of the windows at the Soviets.
Yes, because later on, when they went through the eastern sector, I think all the blinds had to be closed, and the guards would march up the aisles of the train, up the corridors.
Yes.
So that was quite an adventure in itself. And apparently these steps used to take 50 people. Yes, a film. There used to be different layout of the steps because the school photos used to be across there with 50 boys in. Now looking from Drake Boys, the house in the middle of the three buildings that are on the Fliegerdijk, with the kitchen and Frobisher Girls and the dining room on site, and up there is what was in my day Collingwood Boys.
In summer 1961, it was announced that Frobisher was to become the sick bay. The autumn term of 1963 was Mr. Sharp's last term, and it started with many changes to the hitherto stability of the past 10 years. The Bonterheim site had closed at the end of the previous term, and Rodney and Howe Boys moved to the Fliegerdijk. Howe Boys shared the same building as Collingwood Boys, and Rodney Boys shared the Drake Boys building. Hood Junior Girls on the main site ceased to exist, and Howe Girls moved in and took over the Hood building. In the old Howe Girls building, a new Junior Boys house opened, called Mountbatten. Mr. King was acting headmaster for the spring 1964 term, with Mr. Meredith taking up the headmaster position in the summer term of 1964. By simply looking at appearance and fashion in photographs and film from the post-war times, one cannot help but see the changes that had taken place. These appearances were a reflection of far greater changes in our social, educational and cultural developments. Over a decade and a half has passed since Mr. Smitherman, the first headmaster, set up Prince Rupert School. Despite much discussion on the continued establishment of the school, it still remained, and there had been considerable stability.